I've gone on record as saying that I am hyped for the ASUS ROG Ally. Yes, I have a Steam Deck, and these two systems essentially play the same games, but I'm looking forward to more intense competition in the handheld PC gaming space, because that always leads to a better experience for you and me, the end consumer. I watched their entire announcement video yesterday, all 2 hours of it, and I recorded myself talking about what I thought about it, only to find out that I didn't have the damn microphone turned on. That was really painful. But that also gave me an extra day to think about what I saw in that video instead of reacting in the moment. And I think that there's a lot of really good things that got shown off in that video, but there's also a lot of bad. Let's talk about it. This video is not actually a comparison between the ROG Ally and the Steam Deck. I don't have one yet. I did pre-order one. Once I get one in, I'm sure that I'm going to check it out. But they do have one thing in common, and that's that they have the same games. They share libraries. That's the big difference between something like this versus the Steam Deck or an Xbox versus a PlayStation, is the games that you own on one, you essentially own on the other. And speaking of games, I want to talk really quickly about Humble Bundle and the Capcom Heroic Collection. You get 10 games for $30, and it's a ridiculously good deal. And the reason it's such a good deal is because one of my favorite games of recent years, Monster Hunter Rise, is on there. And this game is worth the $30 on its own, which essentially makes Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection, Phoenix Wright, Mega Man 11, Dragon's Dogma, Mega Man Legacy 2, Mega Man Legacy Collection, Lost Planet 3 Strider, and Bionic Commando Rearmed free. Now, I haven't played all of those games, so I can't vouch for, how well they run on the deck or how good those particular games are, but you're getting those for free if you want to pick up Monster Hunter Rise. And you can play Monster Hunter Rise for hundreds of hours. So if you want to support the channel, get a bunch of games for cheap, make sure that you check out my partner link in the description down below. Let's move on and talk about the good and the bad of this announcement with the ROG Ally. And I want to start things off positively and talk about the good. Game Pass is without a doubt one of the absolute best values in gaming, and I cannot tell you the number of times that I've tried out a game that I never would have tried otherwise because it was part of my Game Pass subscription. One of the things that a lot of people are constantly clamoring for with the Steam Deck is the ability to play games on Game Pass without having to use Xbox Cloud Gaming. Now, in this presentation, they talked a lot about cloud gaming, but you can do cloud gaming on any device. So I really don't see that as a selling point for the ROG Ally. I like that they talked about it a little bit, but for me, it's not all that important, and it's not a good differentiator. But Game Pass, playing games locally on that system, is a huge differentiator, and a ton of people will get this as a Game Pass machine, and they're going to be super happy with it. I think that tons of people are going to be picking up Game Pass because they have access to the ROG Ally. So I think that that was a really good thing for them to focus on, and they really leaned into it. Can't remember, I think they called it Control Center, but my brain is very Steam Decky, so I'm thinking of quick access menu. That's the 3 dots. But essentially, theirs is on the left side of the screen instead of on the right side of the screen, and you can customize it. And I think that that's really useful. The ability for you to say, okay, this is a setting that I never change no matter what, so I'm just going to take it off that menu and put something else on here. I really would like to see Valve look at that menu system and change up what we see in our quick access menu, because I like customization. I think that it's really, really awesome. Another thing that I noticed is when they have a button that you can press that shows you all of the things that you can do with those back paddles, which I'll talk about in a second. It'll show you what all of the different buttons do. Valve has that on the Steam Deck. You hold down the Steam button or the quick access menu button, and it allows you to see what you can do, but it's all in a list. And in the video, they showed, instead of a list, it shows you the actual layout of the device and which shortcuts you could do. I thought that that was a much better implementation. It's not a big deal because honestly, how often do I go looking for it? But I do think that it was good. And it's always good to see competition there because it improves things for us at the end of the day. I'm going to reserve judgment about the screen until actually getting my hands on it. But there were things that I noticed in the presentation that I thought were good and things that I thought were bad. I'm going to save the bad stuff for later when we talk about the screen, but the good parts of the screen. The anti-glare coating. Well, they didn't really describe it as an anti-glare coating, but I feel like that's what it is. And it seems like both versions of the ROG Ally have the anti-glare coating instead of just the high-end version, like with the Steam Deck. Now, last year in the summertime, I made this video where I went out in the direct sunlight. I brought two Steam Decks with me, one 512, one 256. The 512 has the anti-glare coating, the 256 does not. And yes, the anti-glare coating cuts down on glare significantly, but I do feel like the colors pop a lot better on the 256 version. So I'm very interested to see how this compares. Just as far as color accuracy, they did say that it's 100% color accurate versus the Steam Deck, which I think is somewhere in the 70s. So this is definitely going to be a more color accurate screen than the Steam Deck. I mean, you look at the Steam Deck and everybody's always saying that the screen is fine, but it's not great, which is why we have things like saturation sliders and stuff like that in order to improve it. Whether or not we're going to see that kind of modifications happening with something like the Ally, only time will tell. I do think that anti-glare screen on both of them is a good thing. The next thing about the screen that I thought was awesome is the fact that this is a FreeSync screen. If you don't know what FreeSync is, the very, very quick understanding of it is, let's say that you're playing a game that can't maintain 60 frames per second. Well, what FreeSync does is it matches the refresh rate of the screen to the frame rate of the game, giving you a smoother experience. I think that that's awesome. This is something that we do manually with the Steam Deck by changing the refresh rate, but now you won't ever have to actually manually do it. Let's talk about the weight of the ROG Ally. The ROG Ally is 10% lighter than the Steam Deck. When we all looked at the Steam Deck for the first time, everybody was saying that it looks big and bulky, and they saw the weight and they said, holy cow, this thing is heavy. I said that too. However, at the same time, I said the layout of the thumbsticks being up at the top of the device means that it's going to be much more comfortable to use no matter how heavy it is. And Valve went hard on making sure that the curves were just right so that it is a comfortable device to hold in your hand. That being said, I've seen a lot of people complain about the comfort of the Steam Deck. I don't understand that, but hey, everybody has different hands, so that's fine. The ASUS ROG Ally, I've heard nothing but good things about comfort when it comes to actually having hands-on with the device. So I think that a lot of that goes to the fact that it's 10% lighter than the Steam Deck. When the Steam Deck first got announced, one of the things that I was most excited for was the fact that Valve was bringing Steam input to this handheld device. And it looks like ROG or ASUS is trying to do that with the Armoury Crate software. They have this Armoury Crate SE software, which has a launcher, which is actually in the bad section for me. But it looks like they're trying to replicate Steam input stuff. Now, I don't believe, I'm very skeptical that this is going to be anywhere near as powerful as Steam input, because Steam input is incredibly crazy with what you can pull off with that device. So I don't think it's going to be that good. But at the same time, you do have Steam and big picture mode, and all of that stuff is on this device too. So you can essentially use Steam input instead of Armoury Crate if Armoury Crate turns out to not be as good. All right, some quick things that I want to mention before we move on. I don't have much to say about these. You can record your gameplay without a plugin. I think that's a huge bonus. There's a fingerprint sensor, so you don't have to punch numbers in order to secure your system. And the price. The price for the ROG Ally is $700. I think that's an absolute win. It's only $50 more expensive than the most expensive Steam Deck, and I and a lot of other people expected it to be much more. Now, of course, we got those leaks which told us that it was going to be this price, but it's really nice to have it confirmed at this price. The $600 version, though, I think that's a huge misstep. Not because I don't think it's worth $600, but I think that the gap in performance between the Z1 and the Z1 Extreme is probably more than $100 worth of gap. And I can't imagine anybody buying the Z1 version and not having more than $100 worth of regret to go along with it. So I guess the price is both a good one and a bad one with that. Now, hey, I'm not an engineer. Maybe there's no way they could get the Z1 chip down cheaper than $600. I mean, they don't have a store sitting behind them like Valve does. But I think the price is really good for the high-end one and not good for the lower-end one. All right, let's move on to the bad stuff. And I got a lot of bad stuff to talk about in this. I really walked away from this feeling disappointed. Number one, this presentation was it was a little insulting that they pretended not to know what a Steam Deck was or what a Nintendo Switch was. If you watch this presentation, there were times when they were specifically calling out the Steam Deck or specifically calling out the Nintendo Switch, but they refused to say the name. It felt forced, it felt foolish, it felt really, really lame. And then they said some really goofy stuff. Like when they were talking about the Switch, they said that the Switch has a limited catalog of games. Really? Yes, the Steam Deck and Steam and, you know, Windows as a whole does have a larger catalog of games than the Switch. But nobody is complaining that there's nothing to play on the Switch. It seemed really disingenuous to me. They also made good points about the Switch not having backward compatibility with old systems and possibly not having forward compatibility with whatever Nintendo brings out next. But there are tons of games on the Switch, and I thought that it was overall a pretty lame take. And then the same thing with the Steam Deck, where they were like a handheld that was released in 2022. Yeah, everybody knows what you're talking about. Just say it. It makes you seem like a doofus when you don't say it. Moving on, they didn't say anything about gyro. Nothing about gyro. I've talked to a couple people that have hands-on with it. Some have told me that there's no gyro. Others have told me that there is gyro, but it's not enabled by software yet. Some might say, well, why would they do that? Valve did the same thing with the original Steam controller. So maybe they're just still working on software for it, but no gyro is really, really painful for me because I love gyro. All right, let's talk about the fake interview. Nothing drives me crazier. I guess not nothing. Few things drive me crazier than fake interviews. We see them every single E3, every single time Microsoft gets up and gives a presentation. They do this thing where they have fake interviews. There's this guy in a chair and there's another guy in a chair and they're talking to each other. But here's the thing. Everybody knows what everybody's going to say ahead of time. And I always feel like they're trying to trick us, and it's insulting a little bit. They did a fake interview in probably the middle third of this presentation, and it was just really felt forced. I did not like it at all. There was absolutely good information in there that they talked about, but I didn't like the format. The format I felt was just goofy. All right, let's move on to the number porn. They absolutely fell into this trap of just throwing out a bunch of numbers without a whole lot of substance. Like they showed a graph that had like teraflops, where this device has this many teraflops. They were talking about the Switch, but they wouldn't say it. This device has this many teraflops. They were talking about the Steam Deck, but they wouldn't say it. Our device has this many teraflops, the Z1 or the Z1, and then the Z1 Extreme has this many teraflops. First off, I'm not going to get into the reasons why, but teraflops are not a good indicator of how well a game system is going to actually run games. And honestly, it's a way for fanboys to point at numbers and see, big numbers better. Big numbers better. I can't stand that big numbers better mentality. Speaking of big numbers better, 1080p versus 720p. On a 7-inch screen, I don't think 1080p is needed. Am I angry that they included 1080p in this device? Absolutely not. But I think that they would have been better off with a 720p screen. Honestly, the pixels per inch at 720p at that size and 1080p at that size, sure, it might be a big difference, but I don't care all that much. And running games on a handheld in a handheld form factor at 720p is going to yield higher frame rates, and it's not going to look as blurry as it would if you're running them at 720p on a 1080p screen. Hopefully that makes sense. Also, 120 hertz is faster than 60 hertz. I love that this device has FreeSync. I don't care that it goes up to 120 hertz. The games that 120 hertz is really, really important for, like competitive shooters and that kind of thing, they're not going to be running at 120 hertz on this display. The games that will run at 120 hertz really don't need to be running at 120 hertz. And so, yes, this system has a 120 hertz screen, but 99% of the time that is just going to be useless. And the only reason that they included it, in my opinion, this is my opinion after all, is because 120 hertz is a bigger number than 60, and that's something that they can put on the side of a box, and people who don't know any better are going to spend money on it saying, see, it's 120 hertz. And then they'll load up a game, they won't turn on the frame rate display, they won't realize that it's not 120 hertz, they're playing a game at 30 frames per second, and they're going to be like, everything's wonderful, I got 120, and it just, again, feels disingenuous. They also made a lot of frame rate claims. Those frame rate claims, what the hell were they talking about? They were like, AAA games will run at 30 frames per second on a competitor's device. On ours is 60 frames per second. Which games? What do you mean? We need more information. You can't just put up a graph and say ours is better because of our graph. You got to actually give realistic numbers and report that stuff. Now, I can't pretend to know how to do that stuff. That's not my jam. If you want benchmarks and stuff like that, check out the Fox. He got his today as I record this. So I'm sure he'll have a video out soon if he doesn't already. And he's going to be on the show on Tuesday when we do our weekly podcast. Okay. Who made these graphs? Apple? Like, these are super Apple-y graphs, and it's just lame. I understand. Listen, I'm a Mac guy. I got a Mac, I got an iPad, I got an iPhone, I got AirPods Pro. I am a Mac guy. I love my Apple devices. Their graphs are stupid. They don't tell you any information, but they do it over and over and over, and it's a really good marketing gimmick. ASUS did exactly the same thing that Apple always does by showing us stupid graphs that don't actually tell a story. It was ridiculous. Let's see. Oh yeah, buttons getting stuck. Multiple reviewers have talked about buttons getting stuck, yet ASUS, they had like a part of their video that showed like a machine pushing the face buttons of the system over and over and over. They said, I think it was up to 10,000 times, or maybe it was 1,000,000 times. I don't know. Linus Tech Tips already had his X button get stuck multiple times. That's a bad thing. I don't know if he's got a pre-release unit or not, but I don't anticipate it getting fixed between now and a month from now when it actually gets launched. You know what I mean? Let's talk about the external GPUs. When the Steam Deck first launched, that's one of the things that I thought about. I was like, USB-C on the top. Can I hook up an external GPU to it? No, I cannot. Why not? Because it's not Thunderbolt 4. Okay. Well, they have a proprietary external GPU that goes along with it that goes somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000. That's a no-go for me. It's not worth that price, in my opinion. For an extra $2,000, I could build a pretty good PC that would probably perform better than the ROG Ally and the commensurate graphics card that goes with it. I think that that's a bad move on their part. Zero gravity cooling. I think that they went to Apple marketing school for this. Okay, sure. If I play a game on my Steam Deck or my Nintendo Switch and I'm upside down, will that impact how well the cooling actually works because they're designed to be held upright? Probably. Who the hell is playing games upside down? I don't know. Are you? Let me know. I don't think that the orientation is that big of a deal when it comes to zero gravity cooling. This is just something, again, that they're doing in order to put a thing on the side of the box, and it's just kind of goofy. Controlling the mouse with a joystick. No, thank you. I am completely uninterested in controlling the mouse with a joystick. Get gyro on this thing as soon as you possibly can. They also didn't mention anything about one of the coolest features of the Steam Deck, and that is the ability for you to suspend games in the middle of gameplay. You can't really do that on most PCs, but on the Steam Deck, you can just press the power button, everything freezes up, you set it down or charge it or whatever, you pick the thing back up, you turn it back on, and you are right back into your game, as long as it's not like an online game that needs to maintain a connection to the internet. I think that that's awesome, and they didn't say anything about that. Next, they talked about battery life. I don't believe their claims. It has the same battery capacity as the Steam Deck. The thing that people complained most about with the Steam Deck, other than the sound of the fan, which this definitely has upgrades over, is the battery. Everybody complained about the battery. Battery life of the Steam Deck didn't really bother me because I don't play for extended periods of time. That being said, it could be better, but this has the same capacity as the Steam Deck, but also runs at a higher power usage than the Steam Deck, which means this is going to have a worse battery life than the Steam Deck. That's just something to keep in mind. So that's the good and the bad of the presentation for the ROG Ally, and I'm honestly really conflicted about this thing. The stuff that I'm hyped about it for is the reason that I ended up pre-ordering this thing. I'm also pre-ordered it because I want to be able to make content about it and make a review video. I want to do that for you guys. But there's a lot about it that I really didn't like, and I'm really nervous about. So we'll see what happens when it gets here in a month. We'll also see how hard it is to actually keep these things on shelves, or if people don't even really know about it, because right now I think that we're all in a very small bubble of people who really pay close attention to this stuff. Getting it on shelves is going to be a huge change for this form factor of gaming. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure that you check out this video right here, because you're probably going to enjoy that one too. From the NerdNest, I'm Bill. Stay rad, everybody.